This content is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not professional advice, technical, financial, or otherwise. Viewers should do their own research before acting on anything mentioned. Results may vary depending on conditions. The information shared here is based on publicly available discussions, general industry knowledge, and speculative interpretations often seen in online tech communities. It starts with something almost unbelievable, a moment that looks too small to matter, a simple idea floating around tech circles, a system reportedly connected to a tiny cost component, something in the range of a few dollars in computing efficiency per cycle, yet discussed in the same breath as billion-level breakthroughs. No tools needed, no professional required, just a concept anyone can follow if they understand how modern AI and energy systems are evolving. Now imagine this, a world where transportation intelligence, not just cars, becomes the real product. For years, people assumed innovation in electric vehicles was about batteries, charging stations, or design. But what if the real shift was happening somewhere invisible? In the code, in the prediction systems, in the learning models that quietly adapt every second a vehicle is running. That's where discussions around Tesla suddenly take a different turn. And at the center of that conversation is Elon Musk, whose companies often blur the line between automotive engineering and artificial intelligence systems. Some online analysts describe a future where vehicles are no longer just machines, but learning agents that improve through accumulated driving data across millions of miles. And that's where the 8 billion mile AI beast idea comes in, not as a confirmed product, but as a metaphor used in tech communities to describe how massive real-world driving datasets could theoretically train autonomous systems. Think about it. Every mile driven, every brake, every turn, every sensor reading becomes part of a learning loop. Now compare that to traditional transportation solutions. A normal high-end autonomous development program can cost billions in research. Companies spend enormous budgets on simulation environments, human driving tests, sensor calibration, mapping systems, and safety validation. Even simple software updates in the automotive industry can involve huge teams and long timelines. But in contrast, the idea being discussed online is that once a system is deployed at scale, the marginal cost of learning per mile becomes extremely small. Instead of paying for controlled tests, the system learns from real-world usage. That's where the cheap input, massive output idea becomes so powerful in these narratives. Historically, this kind of shift is not new. Early industrial revolutions followed similar patterns. First, machines were expensive and limited. Then, once mass production began, cost per unit dropped dramatically. In computing history, we saw the same thing. Early computers filled entire rooms, and now devices in pockets outperform them by millions of times. Some technologists suggest AI development is going through a similar transformation. Early systems required curated datasets and lab conditions. Now, real-world interaction becomes the dataset itself, and that's where the soft, hidden angle appears in many discussions online. Not that anything is hidden in a conspiratorial sense, but rather that the biggest shift is often not obvious at first glance. People focus on hardware. Batteries, chips, car frames, while the real transformation happens in data feedback loops that are harder to see. In many tech breakdowns, this is described as overlooked scaling. When systems improve with usage, not just upgrades, they start behaving differently from traditional products. They evolve. To understand this better, think of a simple idea. If a car drives 1 mile and learns something small, that doesn't seem important. But if millions of cars each drive millions of miles, the accumulated learning becomes enormous. That is the core logic behind why large-scale AI mobility systems are discussed so intensely. Now, let's break it down simply. At the heart of it, these systems rely on pattern recognition. Cameras and sensors capture the environment. The AI processes objects, distances, speeds, and behaviors. Then it adjusts future decisions based on past outcomes. This is a continuous loop of observation, prediction, and correction. In simple terms, it's like learning to ride a bicycle, but instead of one person learning, it's an entire global fleet learning together. But why do problems still happen in such systems? The answer is complexity. Roads are not controlled environments, weather changes, human behavior is unpredictable, and edge cases are infinite. Even the most advanced systems struggle with rare situations that don't appear often in training data. That's why traditional approaches still exist alongside AI systems. Safety validation, simulation, and human oversight remain essential in most industries. Real-world deployment is never purely automated without layers of control. From an economic perspective, this is also interesting. Developing advanced AI driving systems requires massive upfront investment. Companies spend heavily on research, infrastructure, and compliance. But once deployed, systems can scale without proportional increases in cost. This is why many tech companies focus on long-term ecosystems rather than short-term products. Instead of selling just a car, the model shifts toward continuous updates, software improvements, and long-term data integration. That creates a recurring improvement cycle. which is often more valuable than the initial hardware sale. Now imagine a simplified step-by-step flow of how such a system improves. First, vehicles collect sensor data during normal driving. Then, that data is anonymized and processed in large computing clusters. Next, AI models are retrained using updated scenarios. After that, improvements are deployed back into vehicles through software updates. Finally, the cycle repeats continuously, making the system gradually more refined over time. Real-world users often report that performance improves after updates, especially in assisted driving features. While results vary depending on region, conditions, and hardware versions, the general trend discussed in tech communities is consistent. Iterative learning leads to gradual improvement. The bigger insight here is not about any single company or product. It is about how modern technology increasingly depends on scale. Small data sets create limited intelligence. Large-scale real-world data creates adaptive intelligence. And when that scale reaches billions of miles of interaction, the system begins to behave in ways that earlier generations of engineers could barely simulate. This is why discussions around Tesla-style AI systems often feel so futuristic. It's not just about cars anymore. It's about continuous machine learning embedded into real environments. At the same time, it's important to stay grounded. Many of these ideas are still evolving. Public information, research papers, and industry demonstrations show progress, but no system is perfect or fully autonomous in every condition. The reality is a mix of impressive capability and ongoing limitation. Disclaimer, this section is for educational purposes only. There are no guarantees about performance or outcomes discussed in this video-style narrative. All concepts mentioned should be understood as general explanations of technology trends and publicly discussed ideas. Viewers should always evaluate information carefully and consider multiple sources before forming conclusions. And that brings us to a final reflection. In almost every major technological shift, there is a pattern. At first, innovation looks expensive, limited, and uncertain. Then, scale enters the picture. Costs drop, learning increases, systems improve through usage rather than design alone. And suddenly, what once looked impossible becomes normal. Whether it is computing, internet infrastructure, or artificial intelligence, the story is often the same. The real power is not just invention, it is accumulation. So when people talk about massive AI driving systems, billion-mile learning models, or next-generation mobility intelligence, they are really talking about one thing: what happens when machines learn continuously from the real world at scale. And disclaimer, this content is educational and informational only. It does not guarantee any outcomes or results. Any actions taken based on this information are the responsibility of the viewer. Always research carefully, consider safety, and verify details from reliable sources before making decisions. If this helped you understand something new, share it with others who might find this perspective interesting. And subscribe for more educational content like this